Good evening, everybody. And it is Tuesday, August the 18th. And welcome to um, the second week already uh, of, and that means at the end of the second week, you're 1/3 through the course. And that it goes very, very, very fast. So, as I say time and time again, I encourage you to keep up and um, don't let yourself fall behind. So let's see. I thought I hit that chat. Okay, there we go. Activate your audio to hear the lecture. And so I'm going to go ahead and get through. I'm going to try to get through with this at pretty close to 8:30, and then I'm going to continue with what I was going to do last week, but because of our mix-up that we had, thank you, Joey, for reminding me about Friday. So I appreciate you letting me know. I'm a very transparent person. Matter of fact, some people says you're too transparent. I said you can't be, be honest and open with your students and make sure that they become comfortable around you and know that you're a human being. So you can see in my background, I'm in a different area. I'm actually in my regular spot now. Yay, um, I moved down here. So this is where I will be. That's the background you should see, unless I go on a trip. Not likely to happen. Okay, so let's share my screen here. Okay, so I'm not going to cover this. You already been over that. So this is a reminder that our live lectures take place every um, Tuesday, and usually it will be 8:30 to 9:30. Yep, no, I know you're here. I saw you. But uh, today, week 2, is moved up because of WebEx. This is the very reason why I like to convert my videos into YouTube, because then my students aren't affected. So that probably now the video will not be available to those who are not at the live lecture until later tomorrow. But we'll see from there. All right, so let's take a look at our course calendar real quick. Here we go. And this is where we are here. Your initial post, as you learned last week, are now due on Tuesday, so that's due tonight. And your initial post is about, oh, I love this one. This one I have a lot of fun with. Robbery, burglary, and theft. I love this discussion, and I will be talking about it tonight, as a matter of fact. So many of you will have a heads up from coming to the lecture that people that might not have concerning, especially one of these that can trick you. And then, so your initial post will be due tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and your reply post will be due. By the way, that WebEx doesn't affect your assignments. Remember, your assignments are not on WebEx. Your assignments are on Blackboard. Blackboard's not being affected. So somebody say, oh man, oh no, okay. So, and then your written assignment, of course, is due this Sunday, the 16th, and that is Elements of Criminal Law. And we will talk about that in just a few minutes. And then we will come back together next week at our regular time, 8:30 p.m. Central on the 18th. All right, got that cleared up. Oh, just a reminder that the course ends on the 18th. The 18th. So What is today? The 18th, right? So the 18th of September. So you just have a month left and this course is over. That is why I said what I said at the outset. I said that after week 2, you're 1/3 of the way through, and that it actually ends a month from today. We keep it in at that perspective. And you know the cool part about 5.5 courses is, I wish I'd had them when I was in school, is that you can, of course, accelerate and get out of school faster. But the other thing that's really cool is that you don't have to focus long on the course. 5.5 weeks, bam, and you're out, you know. And so it's good. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing, especially in our society today. So anyway, so the 18th will be the very last day, not the 19th and not the 20th. So the last day that Sunday assignments will be due will be September 13th, not September 20th. So let's get that straight now. Somebody said, I didn't know that. I said, yeah, that means you didn't listen to the lecture. So, or look at the lecture. So, even though it does say it in the announcements. So now let's look, and then this is my announcement that I posted, and each of you got it mailed to you as well, reminding you about the lecture that's taking place currently. So, week 2 announcement. Here we go. Crimes against property. And that crimes against property are crimes that we'll break down in detail, and you're going to find out something that I'm going to say at the beginning concerning crimes against property. Your assignment was to read chapters 3, 4, and 12. I sent you the PowerPoints. You should have those already of the textbook to help you with your studying. And then we're going to deal with what are crimes against property, what is larceny, robbery, or burglary, misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism. And then we'll deal with key terms for practice, which I'll show you, and then your practice quiz, which as I encourage you to take seriously, because some of those questions will be on the actual test that you'll have next week. Actually, the 3rd will be due actually that 3rd week. Discussion posts, I already told you about the topic. Initial post, of course, due tonight, reply Saturday. And then complete the written assignment, the identity theft problem. Well, that's like a hot topic today. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then I'll share some instances about identity theft as well as we continue to go through the lecture tonight. And then, adversity to springboard to success, I'll talk a little bit about that after we finish this session. It normally would happen in the open house, but because it was a Friday night and we had a late session, I decided to defer it until today. All right. So let's get right into the module. Okay. So crimes against property. And the assignments are as follows. Your discussion. You're going to determine with this scenario, would the defendant be guilty of one or more of these crimes? Either all 3, either 2 of the 3, or 1 of the 3. You're going to decide that based upon what you may learn from your reading and what I talk about tonight. And so your initial post, you're going to just answer whether or not the person has been guilty of each of these 3 crimes, and if not, why. And And then, do you believe the elements of all three have been satisfied? Elaborate on it. Explain the difference between the crimes and the likelihood of her being convicted of the crimes. For your reply posts, contrast and compare yours with someone else's, so that's the discussion assignment. Again, you know the due date for that. The written assignment, identity theft. And so the focus of this is all about property crimes, and those are larceny, vandalism, burglary, robbery, trespassing, and misappropriation. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, but you're going to demonstrate your ability in this written assignment to differentiate between the property crimes for a given scenario. Now, when you do this, this is a two-part assignment. Two parts. When we get to the rubric, you will see. In the first part, you're going to examine the types of crimes that are committed, and you're going to provide answers. Now, to complete this assignment, you're using this scenario here, and then you're going to prepare a minimum of 2 pages, not counting the reference page, and your 2 pages should be double space or single space. Which one? Which one? Right quick. Somebody type it in there. Double space or single. There you go. There you go. Joey got it right away. Double space. And so you want to make sure that you do that, because you will lose points. Because remember, it's APA, and you want to make sure you satisfy the APA. I spent a lot of time last week talking about APA, and I want to make sure that you get it, not just for my class, but for all the classes, because it's a school policy, and there's reasons why we use APA. If you saw the academic integrity video from last week, and you can always go back and see it, it's on your course homepage. And so you're going to deal with each of these 5 points. Make sure, point 5, if you use your textbook or outside sources, include a reference page. And that if you are going to, period, you are going to, because I've told you up front that you're required to research all written papers. That's on your course homepage. If you go back and look at it, you will see that, because the reason we say that is because you learn more by conducting research. That's how we succeed. That's how I learned to do through college, law school, seminary, any type of education. I do it even now as a professor. I do it now as a pastor for my sermons and things like that. Research and include reference pages along with the APA citation properly. And then, of course, you have a cover sheet as well. Cite the sources. We've already talked about that, but we drum that into it as well. So that's part 1. Now, you don't have to have a separate reference page for the flyer and for this, but the flyer reference information, if whatever you use, should. And by the way, it's going to be PDF. Do not create a flyer with PDF or using Publisher. It's got to be Word. And there's a template in here that you can utilize. And I'm going to look at it to see how creative you were. But you can create your flyer from scratch using Microsoft Word or Publisher. Don't use Publisher. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. And I didn't change it because they asked me, they said, if you want to modify it in your own class, just tell your class what your preference is. Microsoft Word. Now, if somebody says, yeah, but the instructions say, or, I said, you didn't listen to the lecture. The lectures is so important to help you do the assignment right. So do not use Publisher. But you can use this template as a starting point, but it needs to be in Word. Okay? All right. So you're going to satisfy the requirements. It's a one-page flyer. Don't copy some flyer. Be creative. Add your own stuff in there. All right. And it tells you where you can find information like the Federal Trade Commission and things of that nature. It says, do not copy, paste the text directly from the internet. Make this an original flyer and cite your sources in the appropriate APA format, which means in the flyer, there should be citations in the body saying where the information is coming from, and then your reference page should include that as well as what you have for part 1 of the assignment. And then you could do it in zip. Zip's good, but I like people to just attach the 2 files. You can do it either way. I'm not going to penalize you, but they talk about compressing it in zip. Some people don't know how to do it and attach 2 files to it. But it's the same way as if you send an email out to somebody and you want to attach 2 pictures. You just attach the 2 separate files, that's all. But anyway, it's okay, whichever method that you use. But it's got to be Word, okay? Now let's go back and let's look at the rubric, which shows the due date. And then shows you here what the requirements are for part 1. Okay. And then this is organizational. This is pretty much going to match every week. 2-page minimum requirement. Okay. 2 pages. 2 pages for this assignment. Then to create the flyer, 1-page minimum. All right. Have them clean and separated. Don't have them running one into the other. Please don't, because it actually, some people try to attach the flyer to make it feel like 2 pages. I said that's not 2 pages. They're 2 separate parts of the assignment. So you got to make sure that you get that clear. Any questions about this assignment? There is plenty of information out here about identity theft. And we'll be talking about some of it in the lecture itself. Okay, they're seeing none. So let's move right on. And then the final thing that we have, of course, is your live classroom that I will give you the information that you need here. And so we're going to make sure that you get a key phrase that you can provide. And those are the assignments. Moving right along from the assignments, going back to the lesson content where the lecture is going to take place. And so we're going to make sure, again, these are the readings. Now, remember in chapter 12, you didn't have to do the whole chapter 12, just the identity theft section. The reason is because you're going to use that 12 another time. So we're going to talk about what are crimes against property, larceny, burglary, or robbery. Pay close attention, misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism. And then, these are things that we're going to zip through. We already talked about the discussion, written assignment, and live lecture. So let's see. So what are crimes against property? I always start out by telling my students crimes against property are actually crimes that are not against persons, individuals. You'll see that point next week when we come to it. You will also discover this if you pay attention very carefully to the penalties that individuals can receive for committing crimes against property. They're not as severe as crimes against a person. And the reason is very obvious. We treasure life, or we ought to be treasuring life. And so as a result of that, you can get more time in prison or be incarcerated longer if you commit a crime against a person. We'll talk about that. So, and it says it here because most property crimes don't actually cause physical harm, except some robberies. But uh, victims suffer loss from their property. There's emotional stuff. Burglary victims often report feeling that they were violated because your home is your castle, and you should be able to not be violated, and it to be a place where you can be secured. And some people say, well, you got insurance to cover it. Here's what I was telling somebody, and they were talking about this same issue with the vandals in Chicago a few weeks ago. And all those companies have insurance. People don't understand, if they ever took a course in torts or business law where we talk about torts or personal injury, when insurance companies pay off, the premiums of the individuals who have the coverage go up. Consequently, the items that they sell go up and the prices increase. So somebody's going to have to pay it. Or good old Paul's graph. One day you'll go, if you ever go to law school, you'll say, "Oh yeah, Professor Wright mentioned Paul's graph." That's an age-old case. But anyway, insurance uh, still has deductibles that people have to pay, and anyway, it just costs money to us, the consumer. Ultimately, it trickles down to us. All right. So let's talk about these categories. So larceny today, and I'm just gonna skirt over it because we're gonna go into in detail. Larceny. Anybody know another name for larceny that we see today? We don't generally see larceny just right off the bat. Somebody might have read or either already have an idea. Larceny. What's another name that is more contemporary? Anybody? People don't usually get charged with larceny if they take something out of a store. They get charged with what? Without paying for it. What do they get charged with? Come on, criminal justice people. What do they get charged with? Type in the chat box. I'll see it. Yeah. And get the question mark off of there. That's a basic one. And you should know that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That one you gotta know. So, and it's gonna come up in a minute. Burglary and robbery are two different crimes, and we're gonna talk about that. Misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism, and it happens all every day, every day. So let's talk about them one by one. All right. So larceny is, as it says here, is at common law. And common law was, before there were statutes involved, court cases, the unlawful taking of personal property of another with intent to permanently deprive the person of that property. We call that theft today. And so the values of the items will depend on the offense. So generally, if it's in some jurisdictions, such as Joey, you either know this or going to learn this one, that in Florida, if someone steals something $2.99, they're convicted of a misdemeanor. But if it's 1 cent more, then it's a felony, or as some call it, grand theft. Grand theft. So it's kind of redundant to say grand theft, but you know, I guess they say that because the item is of a more higher value, so therefore it's considered as grand thievery. So anyway, that's why you get misdemeanors and felonies. In addition, there's all kind of statutes all across the United States, and we're going to talk about identity theft, retail theft, auto theft, theft of telecommunications video. You all know what theft of telecommunications video, that's stealing cable and stuff like that. Now, that's not using fire sticks, and that's not using Roku and those things. Do you know why? Because what has happened is that the industry has recognized the competition from them, and that caused them to increase their prices to compensate for that as well. And then, you know, there are all kinds of things that you can buy that are legal now that you can utilize. Video, satellite cable services. And so the point of the matter is like, for example, if you hook up your cable illegally after it's been turned off, then now we're talking about theft and those kind of situations. So, all right. So you will find that in anything involving taking something from someone, permanently deprive them basically of what they should be entitled to for utilizing their systems or services, is considered as theft. There are people who know how to turn their gas back on when it's turned off. That's theft. I even know of instances where people have had their power out, and what they've done is they've plugged into their neighbor's outside plugs, and the cords were going from that house to the other without their permission, of course. Then in that case, that's theft also. So it says, although a property crime, auto theft can also be dangerous. And the reason is because it involves vehicles. And we're going to just talk about that for just a few minutes so we don't get caught down on that, that topic. Vehicle theft. So vehicle theft is basically what it says. You click and open it up. It's a form of larceny, and larceny, you are basically stealing the service. And auto theft is a very serious offense, and in most jurisdictions there's some pretty hefty sentences, because you also sometimes endanger a person's life. All right. Common elements of automobile theft include, like you see this right here, you know, their locks are different in a lot of them. My car I have is MKZ, and it doesn't even have one of these type of things. You use the little hand thing, or either a combination to get into it. But anyway, common elements of vehicle theft include intentionally operating or driving without consent of someone's vehicle. That's basically what it means. All right. So it's pretty straightforward. So that's simple stealing of the vehicle. Joyriding is different. And in joyriding, what takes place is that the person takes the vehicle, but what they're doing is they're intending on returning it. And it's not a felony in some cases. Matter of fact, it's usually a misdemeanor. So they don't want to. They just want to take it and drive the car. Who's usually guilty of joyriding are some of your family members. My my niece took her grandmother's car without her knowing it and drove it, and that's a form of joyriding. And then, but she didn't press charges. So But anyway, it's not, the key is that they're not intending on keeping it, okay? They just drove the car. And in various jurisdictions, they have statutes like Ohio prohibits the unauthorized use of motor vehicle. If the vehicle is returned within 48 hours, the offense is a misdemeanor, not a felony. In such case, there's not a lack of intent to permanently deprive the owner, just using the vehicle, for example. You know that if you rent a car and you keep it over the period of time, that they can consider that as not joyriding. They can consider that as possibly theft, because you intend, you have a certain period of time you're supposed to have it back or let them know. But technically, it could be where you have stolen the car and just keep driving it. And that doesn't usually happen. Of course, if you want to rent the car again, you know you're not going to be doing that. Carjacking is the most violent form, and it involves where someone is using a weapon. It's, as you see the guy here with the hood now, and now it don't matter, hoods, baseball caps, ski masks. Now everybody's wearing masks, or should be wearing masks. People commit it. But look at what Illinois, my jurisdiction, and Joey's jurisdiction has here. Vehicular hijacking prohibits a person from knowingly taking a motor vehicle from the person, listen to me, from the person or an immediate presence by the use of force or use of imminent force. Like, for example, dragging you out of your car and taking your keys. That's a form of assault and carjacking as well. And carjacking generally is a felony because of the fact that you are endangering someone's life. If you, anytime you get involved with a crime that jeopardizes someone's life, your time can go up. Okay, and that's it for those as far as larceny dealing with a vehicle. Going back again to talk about general retail larceny, if you, for example, are switching the tags on things, but no, nowadays that's usually done not as much because of the fact that you scan it. However, there are people who still get away with doing that kind of thing as well. All right. So you don't pay the price that the item should be. That's theft. All right. So now let's talk about robbery or burglary. Pay close attention to what I'm about to say. Now, some people use these interchangeably, but they are not the same. They are not even close to the same. So look at what burglary is, and I'm just going to read it. Burglary is defined as breaking and entering the dwelling of another with intent to steal or commit a crime, such as vandalism or arson. Now, there's a common law aspect that's no longer in existence. At common law, burglary had to include these things taking place in the nighttime. But today, burglary can occur in a house, in a vehicle, a business, any time of the day or night. Now, here's the point. In burglary takes place when you enter into the dwelling of another with intent to steal. If you enter into it by reaching your hand through an open window, you are committing burglary. The reason is because your hand is breaking the plane. If you use a stick or anything, it's still burglary. Okay? And again, don't even get tricked by the nighttime thing. And the reason why it was at nighttime, and that's why burglars dressed up in black, because at night they couldn't be seen and they would blend in. And that was where all that originated from. But the point of the matter is now you have a better understanding about burglary. Before, there are people who physically who actually believe that you have to physically go into the place. You don't. You're reaching into it. Does that kind of help you guys? Does that help you with understanding burglary better? Y'all real quiet tonight. And it's earlier than normal, so okay. All right. Because you could get tricked with your one of your assignments and that. Now, let's talk about robbery next. Robbery is defined as the unlawful taking of personal property of another with intent to permanently deprive that person. However, the difference in theft and robbery is that it must be taken from a person. Yes, from that person, and by the use of force, threat, violence, or intimidation. So the question of whether or not in your scenario that you have, did that person commit robbery? I'm not going to answer that. I already did. But the point of the matter is, it must be. Now, some people try to say, well, if the person arrives back and they see them, in that case, is that robbery? No. It says must be from the person. Now, if the person arrives back and then they take it from them, then that is. Remember, um, well, you said rob. Um, well, the point of the matter is that it must be taken from the person, and it must be some form of threat or duress. All right. So, can a person be robbed by a person raising their fists, threatening to hit somebody, and to take that from someone? Can that be? Can that happen? Can that be robbery? Yes or no? It is, because the key is based on the individual's perception, their intimidation or threat. They believe that they're going to be hurt, and you have a weapon in your hand or not have a weapon in your hand. Now, robbery is broken down further into armed robbery, strong arm robbery, or home invasion. A lot of people get home invasion and burglary mixed up, but no. Um, in burglary, there is no physical. You're just taking stuff. And the idea of most burglars is not to come across people, or anyway, that's their objective. Home invasion, um, it doesn't matter. So let's look at these for a minute here. So armed robbery, and you could just see, just using a dangerous weapon. All right, that brings it into armed robbery. That's very easy, so I don't have to elaborate on that. Let's go back. Strong arm robbery is when, for example, a weapon doesn't have to be used, but it's snatched, purse snatching. You snatch something from somebody. Like the scenario, a 25-year-old woman is jogging on a trail. She has a wristlet purse in her right hand, which contains her ID and cash. 17-year-old boy runs up behind her, rips the wristlet away, and runs off with it. He's committed strong arm robbery. Because no weapon was displayed in the above scenario, but force was used to take it, then the crime is still strong arm robbery. The key thing is you got to be very careful about mixing these up. That strong arm robbery and then robbery all by itself. All right. remember, force is the key factor that puts it in robbery, but then there are specifics, a weapon or some kind of threat. If a person is snatching this type of thing, then it's robbery. Purse snatchers are generally. Home invasion is another form of robbery. Now, some people might think of it as burglary. Home invasion, like burglary, but it's more serious because of the violence of threat that happens. Similar to burglary, during a home invasion robbery, an offender enters the dwelling without consent. However, we add force to commit a robbery to the example, and that's what does it. So as good old Florida does describe it as intentionally. Yeah, a lot of people get that mixed up, but you have to very carefully recognize the difference between the two based upon the actual activity itself. Armed robbery is when you're using a weapon and you're putting the person in fear apprehension. Strong arm robbery is, remember, you can catch them by surprise or something like that, but you're snatching it. Think in terms of snatch from a person. That's when you get into strong arm, muscle. Think of it like that. Yeah. So then you got it there. Home invasion, enters the dwelling of another without consent, commits robbery of the occupants. That's there. That's the difference there. Okay. So you see the strong arm robbery again, except it doesn't have to be a weapon. Now, let's say, for example, if a person walks up to a person and then pulls a gun on them and then says, "Give me your purse." Is that armed robbery or is that strong arm robbery? Which is it? It's armed because it says in the scenario that I gave is that there's no wrestling. You're making them, you're putting them in threat and intimidation, but you can get caught in this up into it says, "Oh no, that's strong arm robbery." No, 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 it's not. Strong arm robbery is when you take it, snatch it from the person. That's what if you begin to think of it like that, the way that I shared it a minute ago, then you won't get mixed up. All right. So anyway, that's that on robbery. Misappropriation. Misappropriation is when we start to get into what we call sometimes white collar type crimes, where it's theft, but you don't have to carry away the person's property. What you do is misappropriation means you appropriated it, you misappropriated it. Take the miss and the appropriation. That means that you took it for your own use when it didn't belong to you, in a situation like embezzlement, fraud, forgery, welfare fraud, where you apply for welfare and you work every day and you got good income and you're still applying for welfare fraud because you're not reporting your income. Identity theft, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, and credit card crimes. But embezzlement occurs when a person takes an item from someone they've been entrusted with, such as working for someone, working in a bank, being the guardian over someone's funds, those kinds of things. And converting money to another account that's not the person. Like Mike here is a purchasing manager for a large hotel, and he generates invoices for food and beverages from the hotel. And Mike comes up with a scheme and creates invoices under fictitious business name that supposedly delivers liquor to the hotel. Mike invoices the hotel under the name of fictitious business for liquor that has never been purchased. So Mike has the checks mailed to a P.O. box and cashes them at a local bank. When the scheme is discovered, Mike has raked in more than $10,000. In this case, Mike took advantage of the authority that was entrusted to him working at the hotel and intentionally misused the hotel's money for his own personal gain. Fraud. Fraud can take various forms, as I said, from forgery. Forgery, of course, is signing somebody else's name to a document, like a check or credit card or something of that nature. My wife said to me, I have a check with your name on it, and we have a joint account, and she wanted to know if she could sign my name, or we have an understanding that she can sign my name and it goes into our joint account. That's not fraud, because the intention is not to take away the funds, but to facilitate it. And that's the key to remember is that, is it removing it from the place where it's supposed to go, or are you misrepresenting your current status, such as welfare fraud? Identity theft, you're saying you're okay, I give you okay, Joey has a brother, right? And Joey's brother is a twin, which I just found out from teaching this class, because I know his brother very well. And so if Joey took Joel's checkbook and went to the bank, and Joel didn't give him permission, and he wrote a check and he just, scribbled it in there, and he showed his ID, they might say, oh, okay. But he has committed identity theft, because they may be twins, but they're not the same person. And that's how that kind of works. We don't very rarely have twins doing it, though. So maybe Joey and Joel might work that out in other ways. Okay, so I think, Joey, you're the oldest anyway, aren't you? Aren't you the oldest twin? Yeah, 45 minutes. Right. Uh-huh. And actually it was, did I hear it right? It was 2 different days, right? Yeah, that's what Joel told me. So, so anyway, that's just like, kids born 11:59 p.m. and then the next one's born at 12:30 or 12:10, but anyway, um, that's just a whole nother discussion. But anyway, credit card fraud. Everybody knows what that is. Almost all of us know somebody who's been the victim of credit card fraud. And actually, I include in that debit card as well, where I've had my debit card confiscated, the number, and they don't even have to have the PIN. They can make another card and use it. And so with the technology that exists now, and online purchasing and all of that, it makes it easier to do. So theft by fraud offenses have various acts, such as defrauding a hotel without paying, jumping out of an Uber or a taxi cab. I think in an Uber it's a little different, because they kind of already have some information on you, right? But a taxi cab, that kind of stuff, or either going to a restaurant and eating. They call picking up the food in the restaurant delivery for home DoorDash, but if you leave without paying your bill, they just call you it's dashing, I think. But the bottom line, it's still fraud. So, and then you take off like you're going to the washroom, and you leave out and go around the other side and go. But anyway, the bottom line is that it's theft. And so it has cost us quite a bit as consumers. One of the things that has really created a problem is that people use people's names and social security numbers to obtain loans and things like that, to purchase items. I've had that happen with my sister. I had that happen to myself. But you know, it's very, 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 very serious. I had a situation where I was trying to get a phone for my daughter, and I found out where I used to live had moved away in 2011, that last year, 2019. I was trying to get her a phone, and they wouldn't let me get it because they said that they had delivered a phone to me at an address the year before that I used to live. Well, we found out what happened. Somebody got the mail and filled it out and signed up for it, and they had it delivered, and it was delivered on the porch, and the people that bought the house didn't do it, but someone had gotten it. So they had to just determine it wasn't me. By the way, it took 2 months for them to clear that up. Forgery, we were altering a document. It's a $10 check, and you put an extra zero in there, and it's $100 check. That's why checks should have the written word as well as the dollar amount in there. But there are people who leave gaps, and people can do all kinds of things with forgery. People can now get your accounts by simply your routing number is out there, and everybody has generally the same routing number, you know, such as, you know, I bank at Chase here in Illinois. My routing number is 071013. Professor Wright, you just gave your routing number. No, I didn't. I gave the routing number that everybody at Chase has in this area here. And so you could write that down all you want. But the point of the matter is, I'm not giving you my account numbers. And you add that on there. But people get that information, put it together, and they make up checks and so forth. Welfare fraud, we've already talked about that. Identity theft, we've already kind of talked about that. But you're going to be able to discover through research, the Federal Trade Commission, there's so many things that can happen. Your identity can be stolen just ever so easy in today's time. Okay, credit card fraud, we using the PIN, getting the PIN data and all of that stuff. You ever notice, you know, when you get your credit or debit card, that usually you'll get the card and then your PIN, either you can create it yourself, or either if they have to send you a PIN, then they send it in a separate envelope that's pretty plain, you know, and it'll have your PIN in there. And PINs are often changed. I change my PIN quite frequently, okay? And so let's talk about trespassing. Oh, by the way, so everybody got the point about all of these issues in here because they're pretty well known. Trespassing basically requires a sign that says so, and that you should not be going on the property. You can be arrested, and if it's private property, it's warning or letting you know that. And it's important for people to understand that in order to deal with trespassing, it's, as they say, it's similar to burglary, but doesn't include the elements of theft. You can just simply be walking on it, and you can drive on it, and those kind of things. Then that's trespassing. Vandalism, it is intentional damage without consent the property of another. And criminal damage to property occurs when somebody intentionally damages your property, and it's pretty straightforward. It says it's not uncommon for any of our property to get damaged on a given day, whether you accidentally drop your phone. You drop your phones? Yes, you know what? Almost everybody I know who has an Apple phone, I always say cracked screens go with it. I mean, seriously, bam, you drop your phone. That's it. It's a crack on it. But the key thing is that you don't want to do that. It's expensive. It's expensive getting them things fixed. Even if you have insurance, you still have a $50 deductible that you end up having to pay. And so whether we drop our phones involved in a motor vehicle crash or intentionally damage the property of another, the end result is property is damaged. Okay. And the way in which it occurs, if it's intentional, without consent, then it ends up being criminal damage to property. And normally that's a misdemeanor. Of course, it depends on the value of the property as well. Okay. And that's it for the damage to property and all those different things. Um, any comments or questions before we go to the key terms? Okay, look like that. Okay, I'm gonna help you guys. We're gonna go through each of these sections. We're gonna do a couple, and then I'm gonna adjourn, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the adversity as a springboard to success. Because they're gonna cut us off at 9 o'clock, but I want to be through before that. Okay, let's allow. Okay, the unlawful use of entrusted items or the property of another. What do we call that? Type it in the chat box. Anybody know? Okay, you all are slow, so I got to go. Embezzlement, remember? Embezzlement. The next one. Obtaining some sort of profit or monetary gain from another through deceit, deception, or trickery. Fraud. One more. And this is the last one for this one. The unlawful taking of property from another by use of threat or use of a dangerous weapon or an article used or fashioned in a manner which leads the person to believe that they have a dangerous weapon. What is that? Come on. Yeah, but it's actually armed robbery. But it is robbery. But it's armed robbery. No, but you were right. Robbery, because you focused on it. But see, you got to remember something. Let me show you something about these patterns. You have to remember everything in there. They tell you to narrow it down. The unlawful taking a property of another by use of threat or force or use of a dangerous weapon or any article used in a manner to lead the person to reasonably believe that it is a dangerous weapon. That's when we start talking about armed. Okay. All right. So now that's how you can go through and you can do that. All right. Let's go back. And waiting for it to load. Loading and loading. There we go. Okay, we should be able to go back. And it should go back to the systems get slow sometime. Okay, so it kicked me out. So I gotta go back in. All right. Let's go back to week 2 and lesson content. And then let's just scroll on down. Okay. For practice, which crime against property? You all should know these. For practice, robbery, burglary, or theft. Okay. A 17-year-old boy is walking home from high school and is approached by 2 suspects. The suspects shove him onto the ground and take his wallet. What type of crime is this? The elements here is by force, and they shoved it. So it's not theft. It's not definitely not burglary, and it's not armed robbery because it doesn't say an armed. So yeah, so it is strong armed robbery because the physical force was used to take the wallet. A 14-year-old girl left her bicycle outside on the front lawn. In the morning, the bicycle is missing, and the family reports the crime to police. What type of crime is this? Okay, because it was taken without their consent. The last one. A 25-year-old man is attending a party, this is a good one here, inside his friend's house. While inside, the man breaks into a locked room and steals jewelry. The crime is discovered the next day and the victim reports to police. What type of crime is this? Okay. Well, why don't you say theft? Anybody tempted to say theft? Shame the devil, tell the truth. I know, because every student gets caught like that. No, it is clearly burglary because remember, they break into a locked bedroom. Though they were intended to the party, but they weren't allowed to go in there. And then that's burglary. So the man didn't have permission to be inside the locked bedroom. So you have to read all the facts. When you're taking this test, a test like this without the pressure here, you might mess up with that. So you have to be really careful. So final one, a clerk working at a local gas station is approached by a masked man who points a gun, says, "Give me all the money in the till." The clerk complies. The masked man flees. The clerk calls police to report. What type of crime is this? Of course, because what makes it in there is the gun. That's a weapon. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But if somebody put a gun on you, you will be threatened. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, that's what that is. Okay. So anyway, let's get out of this. All right. I'm going to try to do it this way without having to go through all of that. Well, I don't want to stop sharing. I just want to close it. Let's do it that way. Okay, there we go. There we go. And then the last one. This is the quiz. These are the practice questions that I already told you, and some of these too. will show up in your midterm, which will be week 3. The unlawful entry into the dwelling of another without consent with the intent to commit a robbery is known as what?
I'd say home invasion or trespassing.
Tiffany
Tiffany
says
said
burglary.
burglary.
And you know what? The two that people generally get caught on are trespassing or burglary. But remember, the unlawful entry into the dwelling without consent with the intent to commit a what? Robbery. So you include robbery with entering into the dwelling, and you no longer have burglary, you have home invasion. There you go. The threat. So, yeah, but people get caught all the time and mess it up all the time. They say, but technically, nah, technically nothing. No, it's home invasion. What crime is committed when someone points a weapon at another while on a sidewalk and demands that person turn over personal property such as a wallet? What is it? What is that? Now, this one can really trick you. Which one? Armed robbery. Okay. Any other choices? Yeah, okay. Some people try to use strong arm, but it is straight up armed robbery. Yes, the unlawful taking by use of threat or force is an element that fits that definition. One last one. An 18-year-old high school dropout enters the home of a former student while everyone is asleep, steals a video game. What crime has he committed? Which one? This can trick you. Okay, pick one. Okay. Good thing you did because that's the right answer. The element, this scenario lacks the element of unlawful entry, which makes it a burglary. That's right. Element of unlawful entry. Okay. So yes, it is burglary. And so that's it for those. So you can go ahead and do those and get those done. Okay. So now I'm going to withhold my key phrase for a minute, but I'm going to attempt to get this story in about 20 minutes. As I told you and shared with you, adversity is the springboard to success. Joey, you already know this one. Sorry you got to sit through it though, because you're in the other class. Tiffany, you're not in the other class. You're not in drugs and crime, are you? Are you in drugs and crime? No. So that's why I'm doing it. Um, Adversity is a springboard to success is my motto because it starts out with it's my personal life. When I was 7 years old, um, my dad was murdered in front of my face by a man who turned out to be my mother's live-in boyfriend. I have a photographic memory, so I don't forget it, and it's something that I always remember. And so he didn't go to jail. He continued to stay in the house with us, and then he began to sleep openly with my mother, and he would beat her. So I grew up in the home of domestic violence. The police were there all the time. He fathered two more. My father had five girls and one boy, and that was me, who was the oldest, 7 years old when he was killed. So between those 5 years, he fathered two more girls with my mother. So I had seven younger sisters. The area that we lived in Chicago got rough, and so we moved from that area into Gary, Indiana, which at that time was pretty nice. And so she purchased a single family home. We had already lived in a two flat, which my mother and father had owned, and we lived on the first floor. So at any rate, when we moved to the single family house in 1962, he moved there with us. He didn't continue beating my mother because an aunt came from Michigan. She was like Tyler Perry's character, Medea. She was pretty tough, and she didn't take anything, so he didn't do anything. So in 63, early on in the year, he left. She left and went back home to her husband in Michigan and left us at home. Well, Memorial Day of 1957, which, if I didn't say it already, 57, Memorial Day was when my dad was killed. Well, Memorial Day of 1963, he killed my mother. So both deaths occurred Memorial Day. And we were taken back to Chicago to stay with an aunt, and she didn't want us to live with her. So she made us earn our keep. We were basically turned into servants and slaves and so forth. We had to clean up. We had to do things that her kids didn't have to do. They could go to the Y and do all kinds of things. I had to pull weeds with these fingers here. It was pretty bad. So and then the aunt said that we were going to be split up, all eight of us, and we were going to be in different homes. Well, my aunt came back from Michigan and brought her husband and said, no, I'm going to take these kids, all eight of them. And she had a house built in a further south in Chicago, an area called Maple Park, which is a Morgan Park area, if you know anything about Chicago. And so anyway, living there in 64, I ran into problems with her husband because he wanted me to take his name. And I didn't want to take his name because I was the only one who could carry my dad's name on. So as a result of that, we had all kind of clashes. And there was something about him I didn't like. He didn't seem right to me. My aunt and uncle were constantly in fights. They pulled guns on each other. We kids were right there. There was a lot of drinking and cussing, and it was really bad. So I spent a lot of time outside the house to get away from that, including hanging out at the local church there. But let me tell you something that I discovered when I was 14 years old. It was brought to my attention that the man who killed my dad and now killed my mom, which he was sentenced for killing my mom, if you want to call it that, 10 years. But the way the law was, day for a day meant 5 years. And further, for good behavior, he would serve 3.5 years. Let that soak in. 3.5 years for killing two people, but he was tried for the second one. It's really, really, really troubling. And I was troubled. I started asking questions. Eventually, someone said to me, well, that's just the way the law is. And I said, law? Who runs that? And they told me about these people called lawyers. So I went to the library at my school, this 14-year-old kid who was a little 14-year-old, and I asked the librarian for a book and on lawyers or attorneys. They had one little book. It wasn't really little, but it was one book. It was about yay thick. So I asked if I could check it out, and I did. I took it home that night. I read it cover to cover, the entire book. From that point on, anybody I met, I said, my name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to be a lawyer. I was that determined. Soon as I did that, though, my aunt, the not the one I was living with, but the other aunt, she said, "You're not gonna. You're not gonna. You don't have what it takes." She says, "You're not gonna be able to do that. You're taking on more than you can handle." And so, anyway, while I learned not to respond to her. I just said, "Okay, thank you." And so I went on from there. And in high school, I got involved, as I said, with the church and the youth group and so forth. I applied for the FBI. I didn't include this in one of my stories. And I wanted to go and become a lawyer through the FBI. So I applied. They did an investigation. They came to the school. They went all over, but I was denied. I would find out years later the reason why is because of my race. J. Edgar Hoover was summarily dismissing applications for African Americans, other minorities, and women. So anyway, I went on with my life and I said, okay, I had a counselor at school that was trying to push me into a trade. And I told her, thank you. And I took the paperwork and I never went back to her for advice and threw it in the garbage. So it came time for me to graduate in 1969. I had an opportunity handed to me by the church to go to college with a scholarship. My aunt and uncle, all they had to do was sign. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. And we just didn't get along. By the way, I would find out years later something that I sensed. He was actually sexually assaulting my younger sisters, several of them. So he was a rat. And so anyway, the point of the matter is that I went through all those different challenges. So I told my aunt and uncle that I was moving out after high school, and I did. Some friends I met while at that church, their mom and dad took to me and said, you could come and stay with us while you get your affairs in order. And so I did. I graduated and then ended up going to stay with them. And they refused to accept money for rent. They told me, no, you just save your money. And, they treated me like I was one of their kids. And so anyway, while living there, I took classes at night at a junior college in Chicago called Loop College, which is now Harold Washington, part of City Colleges. And I would have to take the um, two buses and a train to get to work. And I have to be at work at 8:30 in the morning. By the way, my work was a job that was given to me to work at a law firm. And I started working in their mail room. And when I got there, I met these lawyers, and they were most of them Jewish lawyers. I would introduce myself again and tell them I was going to be a lawyer. And they smiled and so forth. Well, as it was, they saw that I meant what I said. And so I stayed a messenger for a little while. By the way, while I was a messenger, I met the chairman of the board and founder of McDonald's, a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc, and he made me his personal messenger. And we had many conversations about McDonald's and how it got started and all of that. So I was doing pretty good for a kid who went through all of that. So I decided to make it more complicated. I got married to a young lady I was dating, and we got married in 70. And by 71, had a daughter. 72, another daughter. She was in school, I was in school. So I'm working at the law firm. The law firm saw I was doing so well. I was on the honor roll and dean's list at school. I would have to be in class at 4:30. I got off at 4 o'clock. I get out at 10 o'clock, Monday through Thursday, and then Saturday classes. So it was, and I had to carry books. It wasn't, we didn't have, there was no digital stuff. None of that stuff existed at that time. So I ended up reaching the point where I found myself going to uh, the law firm, and they moved me up to a file clerk. Then they promoted me to a law librarian. They found out that I knew how to do legal research, so they ended up um, promoting me to a position that's called law clerk, which is today called paralegal. In the meantime, it was time for me to leave. I had left, actually, maybe left at that time, um, Loop College, and went to four-year institution Roosevelt. Declared my major political science, minoring in accounting, and I stayed active in things at the school as well. And again, I stayed on the honor roll and dean's list. In fact, articles were written about me, newspaper clippings I still have about how they were surprised that would happen. So anyway, it came time for me to take the LSAT, the LSAT. I didn't do well on it, but I knew that I was smarter than that test proved. So then I had decided that I was going to one law school, and that was it, Northwestern University School of Law, which, by the way, you saw the picture. If you looked in my student lounge, you saw that. The point of the matter is that we were told to apply for 3 schools so you could have a backup. I said, I'm not doing that. And so I put my application together to Northwestern. It's 6 pages long, but I added all kinds of exhibits, and the package was yay thick. And I sent it over by one of the lawyers. Well, the law school said that they didn't do interviews personally because of the fact that they said that they didn't have the time. There was at least, I want to say at least 1,000 people, close to 500 to 1,000 people applying for each seat of 250. So here I go to the school and I sit down and they interview me, and they start to uh, say to me, we like this package, and they asked me questions for about an hour and a half, seemed like it was 2 hours. And then finally they adjourned and they came back and they said, we like everything we saw, but we don't make decisions like this. But what we are going to do is we're going to tell you, we're going to send you some correspondence in the next few days, and you're going to find yourself in a situation where you will be able to succeed in that. Um, I'm going to go ahead and give the key phrase now, um, because if they cut me off at 9, then you'll have it. The key phrase is property crimes. That's it. Okay. So I only said it one time, and I'm not saying it no more. All right. So somebody said, I didn't get the key phrase. I said, well, that's because you didn't listen to the story. So anyway, after that, a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying to me, congratulations, you've been accepted. So great. I started the class of 75, graduated. My wife graduated from college with a degree in education teaching. I began taking classes at Northwestern Law School. I had to leave my job. She was the one working. But then I began in class. Things were going good. It was a tough road to hoe because it was a lot of work. I mean, if you think you're getting work now, this was nothing. And so anyway, I found myself in a situation where the teachers went on strike. That was our income. We didn't have any more income. So we had these 2 girls, and we had our apartment. Our lights were turned off. I had to study by candlelight. I had to eat out of cans, and all kinds of, it was rough. So we sent the kids to their grandmother, she didn't live far away. And so I ended up reaching the stage where there was so much pressure on me that I told one of my professors, Joyce Hughes, I said, and she's there right now. She's still there helping people. And she said, I told her I was going to take a leave. She said, before you do that, come to my office. She took me to her office, and I sat in her office, and she ended up taking me in there. And I decided, after being forced and not told I couldn't get out of that room, to ride it out and continue on. So I did. And of course, 3 years later, I graduated with my law degree. But in between that time, I met a gentleman by the name of R. Eugene Pincham. He was a lawyer. His son was my classmate. He was actually in the class in front of me, but he took some of us to his house, and his dad got to hear my story, and he said, "You need closure." So he took me to the county criminal court building, and we ended up getting the records. And so the bottom line was I was able to get that. And then he gave me a suggestion. He says, if you want to learn about this system, become a criminal defense lawyer. And so I decided to go ahead and take him up on it. So back at the law firm, I ended up going back. 2 years later, in '80, I left to start working with some guys in my own practice and start very small practice, but it grew. I started doing radio, show called Know Your Rights, spelled with a WRIGHTS. Phone number 974-4487, which spelled WRIGHTS, and I was doing well. In the meantime, by the way, before I graduated from law school, I had my third daughter. And so anyway, we found myself in a situation where my wife and I were heading in different directions. And so we were divorced in '87. And after that, then I decided to go into seminary, and that's when I became a minister. And I continued practicing, and I would use that in my practice with my clients. I preferred criminal law, but I did entertainment, sports, radio, TV. I represented baseball players, basketball players, a few football players. I did all those different kind of things. I represented entertainers, a little small group that were kids that I first ran across them when I was a little boy. I didn't know they would become famous, but they did. They lived on a street called Jackson Street. Yeah. And I wasn't their main lawyer, but I was part of a consultation with their lawyers and meeting with, I think it was Joe, the dad, who was engaged in that discussion because he was managing them. But anyway, I did all kinds of people, all kinds of entertainers, radio people, TV people. And so anyway, but criminal law was my big ticket. So when I was separated, divorced, I met a young lady, and I decided that we started dating, and I went to her church, and then we ended up getting married, and we had another daughter. So here comes daughter number 4. Uh, yep, yep. Not too far from where I lived in West Gary, and they lived on Jackson Street. I could walk to their house from where I lived. They used to little kids be in the yard just tinkering with musical instruments back in those days. We were talking 62 to 63. And so anyway, I found myself with this young lady, and then her mother became the village president of a tough town called Ford Heights, and so in that scenario, she became the mayor, and I was invited to be the village attorney. I said I would take the job only if I could carry a gun. Said you can't, you have to be a police officer. So I became a part-time police officer. Then I became an investigator because the chief of police was crooked. So I continued doing that. And so I found myself continuing to operate in that vein. Well, I found out that she was messing around with the pastor of the church, so she and I split up, and I went my way. And then in '94, I met the young lady that you see on the picture. We've been married now 26 years. We have 4 kids too. You still saw them on the picture, 2 boys and 2 girls. And so I decided, and when I was 50 years old, we got married in '94, that I would retire from practicing law. And I did, and I began teaching special education. I began running a janitorial company for a company called Service Merchandise. I began also operating with doing closings for title companies, going to people's houses where they refi. So I did all of that. And then finally, in 2011, someone came to me about this school I had never heard of called Rasmussen College. And I did research to find out how credible they was. I found out that the chairman of the board was the former president, one of them of Northwestern University, not the law school, but the whole university. So I took a job as an adjunct professor in October 2011, teaching business law residentially. Well, I let them know quickly that I was a person who was interested in being a criminal justice person. So they moved me into the criminal justice department and I started teaching in criminal justice as an adjunct. Finally, in 2014, a position opened up for state program coordinator of the School of Justice Studies for Illinois, which encompassed Mokina campus, Aurora campus, Rockford campus, and my home, Romeoville. And I did that for a year and a half. And then, by the way, they went online in 2013, and I had to learn how to do that. And when I want to do something, I get it done. So anyway, I began teaching, and I've been teaching there continuously since. I started out as an associate professor, assistant professor, and now I'm full professor, Dr. Richard Wright. And so I'm here teaching you guys and have taught many students who are out in the field, who are on their way to being professionals. Joey's brother, Joel, will tell you about me and how I have taught. I have many students that are friends of mine on Facebook. If you want to be a friend of mine on Facebook, you can go to Richard Wright JD, and you can find me there and send me a friend request and I'll accept it. Because I stay connected. My students, when they graduate, I help them out writing letters or making phone calls, doing whatever I can do to help my students. And so I'm here to help you guys. And so that's why my motto is adversity is the springboard to success. I gave you the quickest version that I've ever given about this. And I do hope that you will understand that I'm an empathetic person because of what I went through and is able to help my students to be successful. My goal is ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice individuals to try to change the tide and to give us a better relationship with the community. And so with that, I'm going to say good night. I already gave you all the key phrase. I'm not saying it again. It's already been said. And I want to say again, see you guys next Tuesday, the 25th at, remember, we go back to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So get those assignments done and you know what to do if you need to reach me. So I thank you guys for coming out tonight, and I'm going to say good night at this time.